What's up, guys? Glad to have you here for another episode of the Time to Man Up podcast. If you're able to see this, you can check out, we've got, let me move this microphone a little bit here. We've got a new shirt that we've come out with, and that's available actually at hessenscandle.com. And we've got a number of faith-based shirts that we've come up with, but also there you can find a new Man Up shirt with the shields from 1 Corinthians 16, verses 13 to 14. And again, make sure that you get to timetomanup.com because you can get the first session of the Man Up series at the most amazing price. I mean, amazingly low. That's free. You can check out the study, but make sure to like, subscribe, share, do whatever you can to help us get the word out and let people know about Time to Man Up. And man, share with your pastor, your ministry leader about this men's study. Now, clearly, I've got my representing my Ohio roots. You can see this shirt that we came up with, Victory with the cross in the center. If you're familiar with Ohio sports teams, it is the Cleveland Cavs color. That's not necessarily why we chose it. We like the color combination, but it represents that. And then I've got my Ohio State water jug here, whatever it's called. So in this episode, we are going to look at who determines your value as a man. Who determines your value? I am not a big social media guy, but when we launched into these two couples, a couple of businesses, and that was Time to Man Up and Hessens Candle, when we launched those, I had to become much more active on social media than I would prefer myself to be. I mean, I'm on there promoting these businesses, trying to get them out there. And to be honest, I don't know if I'll ever figure this out. Maybe you are active in social media and you get it. For me, I'm not sure if I'll ever get that down. But what I do notice is this: when I'm on social media, and we've done an episode on this about selfies and how there are so many women out there that post selfies, pictures of themselves. And in that episode, I talk about the fact that when I see women, and it doesn't mean they just put one or two pictures of themselves, it's like an everyday or every other day occurrence that they are putting a picture of themselves on social media. Usually that is a sign that something is missing in their life. They need those affirming words from people, and it saddens me to see that, because usually I'm thinking, where is the man in this situation? And there will be a lot of situations where it's someone that doesn't have a man in their life, and so they are reaching out because they want those affirming words, right? They are seeking value from the opinions of other people, #men, right? Because if you'll notice, if you get on and you click, now I don't want you searching for women's selfies, guys, but if you see a woman that puts a lot of selfies, usually what you will also find is that a predominant amount of the responses where they say, you look great, you're beautiful, you're hot, or any other affirming words of it, usually it's men that are making those comments. Seldom do you see many women making those comments to them. And the sad thing is that what would be best for them is to have someone speak truth into them and say that your value is not determined by what some guy thinks of you that is your quote unquote friend, because on Facebook you're friends, which is kind of a joke, right? I mean, how many of your Facebook friends are you really friends with? Or it's just to increase your numbers of people that can see what you're putting out there. Because if you really are a friend, you probably are building that relationship outside of what you put on social media or what that person puts on social media. But you have these women that are putting stuff out there and they are finding their value in what people say. But what I've also noticed is not only are a majority of the people guys, you seldom see somebody say, "Oh, poor girl, I wish you had someone in your life that made you feel special so you didn't have to turn to social media." And right, so these women are having their value determined by what people are saying on social media. And unfortunately, a lot of the guys are just wanting more pictures, so they're going to say, "That's great, you're beautiful, keep doing it, keep putting it out there." But here's why I mention this. As a man, where do we find our value? How do we determine our value? Right? Because it used to be that for a man, his value was found at work. For a woman, her value was found at home. And then the monster of social media came in, and now we try to figure out, where is our value? Uh, who is determining our value, men? Right? Not just how do you determine it, but who is determining your value? Is it your wife if you're married? Is it your children if you have children? Is it the word of God? Who is determining your value? So, as I was thinking about this episode, and sorry if you're just listening, you're not going to be able to see this, but it made me think of card collecting, right? Sports card collecting. And we talk about the value of a card. Who determines the value of a card? I mean, card collecting is so different now from when I was growing up. When I was growing up, and some of you probably did the same thing, we would put baseball cards in the spikes of our bike so that it would go, right? You'd put it on your bike, and every time the spikes went around it, it would click. And we would do that with baseball cards. I'm just going to tell you this, that if I knew how much those baseball cards would have been worth, I never would have stuck them in my bike spokes to make clicking noises. And what's interesting is when we look at who determines the value, when my dad went off to college, he had a lot of cards in a box. And I'm sure my dad had them stored really nice, really making sure nothing would happen to him. And when my dad went to college, my grandpa and grandma threw his cards out. I mean, so my dad would have been collecting like the oldies but goodies in baseball, right? And back then, the collecting wasn't the same. Now nobody cares about like the players. It's all about special cards. Who gets the autograph card? Who gets the special inserts with all the different designs on them? Card collecting has changed a lot. To be honest, I always collected it for my favorite players, and so I'm sure that I probably made some really bad trades to get cards. The fortunate thing is, my two teams that I like to collect were the Cincinnati Reds and the Oakland A's. And back in the 70s, they were very good teams, and so they had very good players. But you just really didn't think back then about the value of those cards. And now people rate cards, and it's based on what good quality they're in. And when I go through my old cards, I'm like, yeah, they're pretty beat up. Because I would play games with them. We played a game where it was like a Fort Apache, and we would open the fort up like a home run wall, and we would roll marbles, and you'd have to flick them with a pin, and we'd have cards set up that if you hit a card and knocked them over, you were out. And we would play for hours. And in that time, man, cards got bent, cards got ripped. I can't imagine the cards that we went through that probably to this day would be worth something. Because why? The value of those cards to us was not a financial value. It was more about who was on that card and what could we do with it? What games could we play with it? And that's what determined it. Now, I want to share a very interesting story that taught me a lot about the value of a card. And so when I was young, so this would have been 1975, So that would have put me at around 8 years old, 7.5, just short of my eighth birthday. And so I'm collecting cards, and my dad was a teacher, and the school that he taught at was right near, I believe it was a 7-Eleven or Stop and Go, one of those convenience stores. And they always had Slurpees and cards. And back then, gum came in the cards. The gum was always stale. It never lasted, left stains on the back of the back card. But there was nothing like getting a pack of cards for whatever they were back then, a quarter, 10 cents, I can't remember. Compared to now, I just was at the store and I saw a value pack of cards. So get that value pack of cards, and it was $16 for a little pack of cards. And I thought, the days have so changed. I'm glad my kids didn't collect sports cards, because it's out of control what people now pay for cards. And so in the 70s, it was a good time to collect cards. And so this is a picture for you that can see. This was the 1975 layout for Topps baseball cards. It's one of my favorite designs of a baseball card. It reminded me of the decor of the Rose Bowl, right? In the Rose Bowl, they would paint half the field one color, half the field the other color, representing the two teams. And that's what the 75 Topps card did. And what was interesting about it is that this is a George Brett rookie card. And I could not find the other one, but I have two George Brett rookie cards. And why I talk about it is the story is interesting, because, like I said, we put baseball cards in our bike spokes so they would make the clicking noise. And I left my cards laying around one day, and my dad pulled in and he drove over some of my cards. And then you have that hard lesson. Well, son, you need to pick your stuff up, and things like that. But I didn't think anything about value. But somewhere in my cards, now that we've moved a couple times, I have no idea what box it's in, but I have a twin to this card. And so I don't know what this card is worth. It's a rookie. Yeah, maybe it's about $600, $700. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I don't pay a lot of attention. I probably need to pay better attention. But it's got some flaws to it. It's got some wearing on the corners, but it's probably in better condition than most of my cards from the 70s are in. But I've got another George Brett card. Again, it looks exactly like this one. But there's one difference. That card is one of the cards that was driven over by my dad. And so because of the grain of the cement, the blacktop, you can see the pebbles and stuff. I mean, it destroyed the card. The picture looks fine. It just has all of these like bumps from the tire rolling over it, from the blacktop underneath it. And basically, it has no value. So one card is very close to being like, not mint condition, but it's pretty good compared to that other one. And I wish I could have found it, because it would have been really funny for you that can see to see it. But it's trash. And so as I think about these cards, and each card comes with a value. So some interesting cards that I have is this one, a Tom Brady rookie card. And in that year, I bought some cards. I stopped buying probably not too long after this. I didn't buy too many cards. You're married, you have kids, you just don't have the money to do it. But I got a Tom Brady rookie card. I don't have many of these, though. In all the football that I bought that year, I don't have many. And here's one that's really funny. So there was just a day I was out with my wife, and I just thought, you know what? I want to buy a pack of basketball cards. I wasn't collecting, but I just thought I want to buy a pack of cards just because I want to buy a pack of cards. It was always fun for me to open up the pack. You don't know what you're getting into it, and it's an exciting time to do that. And when I opened my one pack, there was a Steph Curry rookie in it. I don't know the value of Steph Curry rookie, but I'm sure it's pretty good. But when I saw that was in there, I thought, man, that is valuable. But each person will determine the value. I always told my kids when they would see my cards, they were like, I bet you those are valuable. I said, well, they're only valuable if someone else determines them to be valuable and will pay the money. Otherwise, they're just cardboard with images printed on them or whatever type of paper they use with an image painted on it. So seeing that George Brett card with all the lumps on it and then seeing the one that was better, it always reminded me of the fact that it's who holds it that determines how valuable it is. So I wish that I could have found my other George Brett card because it would have been a lot nicer for my illustration. But this George Brett card that's in good condition is not what I'm usually like. What I'm usually like is that George Brett card with all of the bumps from the blacktop. It's just messed up. That's usually when God looks down on me. He sees a flawed man that is imperfect. But even in spite of that, what I know is this: God created me in his image. God created me in his image. And when he created me, there were no flaws. There was no fraying on the corners. It was perfect. And he created me. And then I was born and sin entered the picture. And there was imperfection. And yet, even in my imperfection, God loved me. So, guys, what I want to talk to you about briefly here is, where are you finding your value? Right? Where are you finding your value? Is it based on what other people think about you? Is it based on what God says about you, that you were created in his image, that you are fearfully and wonderfully made? I know that usually just feels like a girl's verse, right? I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and it helps women realize you don't need to put all those selfies out there because that's what God says about you. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. If you go and tell a guy, hey, I just want you to know, brother, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, it's kind of like, whatever, right? I mean, it's just not a guy thing, but it's a true thing, and it's what God sees us as. He sees us as fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God. So I want to talk to you a few things about where a man finds his value. When we look at authentic manhood, and I love Robert Lewis's study, Discovering Authentic Manhood, but he talks about that there are three aspects, and the first one is a will to do. When we look at life, guys, we find value in following God's plan. There was value to the life of Jesus when he stuck with God's plan. He said, may your will be done, not mine. And so, guys, when God has a plan for us, when we are in tune with that plan that he has for us, we live out that will. So, for instance, you think, well, it's hard to know his will. But there are some things in God's will that are pretty easy to figure out. Number one, I want you to be the husband that you need to be to your wife. Okay. So we can find value in carrying out his will by being the husband we need to be to our wife, by being the father we need to be to our children, by being the men in the church that we need to be for our church, by being the men that we need to be in our community. Those are things that God gives us a job, and he shapes us to be able to complete that task, that will to be done. But then for men, and if you've had a job ever, you know this to be true, we have a work to do. And in a completed job, we find value, we find satisfaction. There have been jobs that I have taken on that I never should have taken on. They were well outside my ability to complete the job. But I took them on anyway. And sometimes along the way, I had to bring someone along to help me, and we completed that job together. But there is something for a man in his value of completing a job. I think it's pretty cool for those guys that build their own home. I mean, living in a home that you built, that's pretty awesome. Do you know who's never going to do that? Me, because I don't have the ability to do that. I mean, I could get a cardboard box and paint it and do something with that, waterproof it if that's possible. But I'm not building a home. I just can't do it. For me, that job to complete was ministry, ministering in people's lives, raising 3 kids, loving my wife. And sometimes I'm really good at those things. Sometimes I fail at those things. And that's why that third job that we have is a woman to love. If you are married, God has given you that woman to love, to be provider of. And I tell men all the time, our responsibility is to give safety and security to the woman God gives us, right? Because when she feels safe and secure, there is freedom in that for her. And a lot of times what happens is, in the absence of a man in a woman's life, they turn to those things like selfies. So when I see a married man's wife posting selfies all the time, I think that is the evidence, often, not always, but it is often the evidence of a man that is not being the man that he needs to be in that marriage, in that relationship, and he needs to step up. So there are people that would take this card and they would put a value to it, and they would say, it is this quality, it is this value, and this is what you could get for it. But if someone is willing to pay more for it, then it has a greater value. If they are willing to pay less for it, then it reduces that value. If they don't see any value in it, then this doesn't have any value, and it's nothing but just a card with an image on it with some stats on the back. Here's what I want to tell you, men. God looked at you in your sinfulness, in your imperfections, and he said, I love you so much. I am willing to give my son for you. Because, right, the value of this card is what someone is willing to pay for it. Your value is based on what someone is willing to pay for it. And I'm not talking financial money, guys. I'm talking about the fact that God was willing to give his son to die on the cross for you because you were valuable. Jesus was willing to put aside his own desires and say, God, may your will be done. May your will be done. If there's another way, let's do it. But if not, may your will be done. So Jesus was willing to lay down his life for you. And in that, we find value. The value plays out in the way each man lives his life. And you have heard from me, and you will continue to hear from me. Again, from Robert Lewis, Authentic Manhood. And the pillars, the foundation of authentic manhood is that men, that we reject passivity. There is no value in passivity. The value comes when men reject passivity. Men, the second is that we have to accept responsibility. Stop blaming other people for your problems, but accept responsibility. I mean, guys, it drives me crazy in this day and age how when someone fails to get back in touch with you, it's always like, well, I was so busy. It's been a crazy week. And I'm like, often the truth is that they just forgot. They got busy and forgot. And do you know what? It's okay to say that. Why do we have to act like we didn't forget? I mean, there are people that have reached out to me and I just get back with them and I say, I'm so sorry. I forgot. We want to have a truth that makes us look better, but that's not value. Value is being willing to speak the truth and say, I forgot. I'm sorry. Guys, the third aspect of authentic manhood is that we need to lead courageously. We need to be out front, leading our wife, leading our children, leading our churches, leading our communities. We need to be men that are out front doing those things. We need to do it courageously. And then finally, we need to invest eternally. Listen, these cards, again, I don't know their value. I don't really pay attention a lot to it. They just sit in a box, and at some point, I'll probably do something with them. And but Steph Curry rookie, Tom Brady rookie, I'm sure they've got some value. George Brett rookie, I'm sure it's got some value to it. Looks like his bat has a little less pine tar than it had when he played, but for you that are older and you know exactly what I'm talking about. But people put value to that. But guys, our value comes from God. And God has given each one of you a purpose to fulfill, a will to do, right? A work to do, and a woman to love. And for you that maybe God hasn't brought you that woman yet, or maybe you're a person that God brought you that woman and you lost her, whether through divorce or to death. And we just talked about that when we looked at when we have a bad day, when things go tough, what is our response? And we learned that the Lord gives and the Lord takes. How do we respond in those situations? But the fact is that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that God has given us a shape. And I love talking about shape. I won't talk about it a lot in this, but I will tell you, it's spiritual gifts, it's heart, your passion, it's abilities, it's your personality. And oh my goodness, how can I go blank? Experiences. I went blank for a minute and I'm like, oh, what is the shape? What is it? But your experiences. And I feel that that's the most important thing, because people look at their experiences and say, man, I've screwed up so many times. How can God use that? That's exactly what he uses. Because in our weakness, his strength is seen. So men, there is no one like you. You have value even when you don't feel like it. And it is your job to treat your wife, treat your children in a way that shows them that they have value. And value is not based on always being successful. Because even in our failure, we still have value. Men, it's time. It's time to man up. Have a good day.